for the 2021 meeting of the Half Moon Bay Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee meeting. As we always do, we'll start with a roll call of the members, please.
Committee member Foldenauer?
Here.
Committee member Olson?
Here.
Committee member Ray Dupree? I don't see her here, so we'll wait. Committee member Schiller?
Here.
Committee member Spink?
Here.
Committee member White?
Here.
Perfect. We have a quorum. And I'll put myself back on mute.
Great, thank you, Sherry. So the next item on the agenda is to actually review the agenda. And this would be the opportunity to make any changes that we would want to make for tonight's meeting. Maz mentioned perhaps moving the election of vice chair to later in the meeting when we have all in attendance. But I'll leave that to the pleasure of the group, what you all might think about that. Brandon, was that a move to the end?
It works for me.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
It's fine with me.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, why don't we will move agenda item 3A1 to the conclusion of tonight's meeting. All right, then with no other changes, I think we move on. Acknowledging the meeting minutes from our September gathering. Hopefully you had a chance to review them. If there were any corrections that needed to be made, now would be the time to bring those to our attention and we could get those corrections. Any changes, edits proposed? All right, seeing none, I think we just acknowledge the minutes. We don't actually take a vote on approving them. So the minutes are acknowledged. Moving on to agenda item 2, and this is a public forum. So for those in the audience, this is your opportunity to speak on an item that is not on the agenda. So we have a number of items on the agenda this evening. If you wish to speak on something that is not covered by one of those topics, now's your opportunity to do so. And Sherry, I'll turn it over to you.
I don't have any hands raised, so if there are any attendees and you wish to speak on any items not on the agenda, go ahead and raise your hand. That is at the bottom of your screen. Okay. We do have one, Evelyn D'Souza. I can move her up to a panelist and allow her to talk, or I'll just allow her to talk. Evelyn, can you hear?
I can.
Okay.
Just a quick question, and I'm not sure if this is part of the agenda. Is there a map of this so we can see what it all looks like? I didn't see that on the agenda.
Is this for the...
For this coming the Poplar Street?
Yes, we have a PowerPoint presentation, so that will be shared with you in just a few moments.
Wonderful, thank you. That was my question.
Perfect, thank you. Anybody else? Nope.
I also wanted to note that committee member Ray Dupree has joined us.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you, Maz.
We do have one more hand up.
All righty. We have Paul Gator here. I'm going to allow him to talk. And go ahead, Paul. Hi, welcome.
Thank you, Sherry. Thank you, Sherry, and thank you, committee. I hope you can all hear me. I was a former member of the BPAC on the inaugural BPAC, so it's good to see Mario and Carlene again and Maz. I just wanted to have a couple of words of thanks for projects that have been completed that we worked on in the 4 years of the first BPAC, because I think we sort of get sucked into what's happening next, and we don't often get time to reflect back on what we actually achieved. So the first one kind of caught me a bit by surprise, actually. It's the trail repair parallel to Poplar between Railroad and the parking lot. which I think was a fairly small project that came up during one of our meetings, and it's relatively simple and easy. I'm sure Maz might not agree with the simple or easy, but it's relatively speaking simple or easy for that fix. And I didn't even realize it was being done until I rode down there myself a couple of days ago and saw the trail was fixed, nice wide asphalt trail. And I hope it helps in keeping people separating bikes and pedestrians from traffic down there and contributing to the traffic calming that I know you're going to talk about later on Poplar Street. So thank you for that one. The other project is the complete polar opposite, and that's the Main Street South project, which is great to see that that's finally concluded. We spent many hours talking about it in committee and with the Planning Commission. So I'm pleased that it's finished. As a road cyclist, I was particularly pleased to see the green painted road separated lane for cyclists when you're coming in from the south, which makes that junction much more safe now than it was before with that old slip road. And I think I'm right in saying it's also the first example of painted bike lanes in the city, which was something that I felt personally quite strongly about when I joined the committee, that we needed more of these in town. We needed to have some. So this is a start. I look forward to seeing more of these, clearly marked off bike lanes as we move forward with other projects that are on this committee's agenda and priority list. But basically, I just want to thank the city, all the city staff who were involved in that complex project. I think it was an eye-opener for us on the committee to see just how difficult these projects can be to get done. But it is done. I think it's a great contribution to the city. So thank you to the staff and anybody who was involved in getting that project completed. And I just want to wish that the new BPAC the best of luck and success as you move forward with other projects that we identified in the master plan a couple of years ago. So thanks for listening.
Paul, thank you very much. It's good to hear your voice and glad that you're still engaged, and very much appreciated the way you're starting off this meeting with some positive words and encouragement. So thank you, Paul. Very much appreciated. All right. Any other public comment on an item not on the agenda?
I don't have any hands raised.
All right. Thank you. Then moving on with the agenda. So now we're on number 3, and this is administrative items. Recollection that we move the election of vice chair to the end of this meeting. And so we're going to move on to A2, which is the BPAC 2022 schedule. It was included in your agenda packet. Hopefully you had an opportunity to review it. Any questions on the meeting schedule for next year? All right, seeing none, then we're going to move on to some of the main items on our agenda tonight. And so we're moving on to B. This is the Poplar Street Traffic Calming and Safety Project. And Maz is going to take us through a presentation. So Maz, it's yours.
Thank you, Mario. We actually have our design team with us here. CSW SD2. We have Robert Stevens and Julia Harbison that are going to be presenting the project to us and kind of go through the project and kind of bring everybody up to speed. I just wanted to introduce them and say a couple of words. So as many folks know that have been engaged in this project in the past, we've been going through the public outreach process for this project for a number of years. We've had several public meetings and community stakeholder meetings through the BPAC, as well as standalone meetings for the project to get feedback and get some feedback from the community and to really share what we're trying to do. And so happy to be back and presenting this project to the community again. We did send out some mailers to our residents along the corridor that have been interested in the project up to this point. And I see we have a good number of attendees here. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to touch base. We're going to go through a project schematic design here. And after this meeting, we will actually be posting the presentation as well as the video on our website for anybody that wasn't able to attend tonight. They can see it on their own time. And with that, I'm going to ask Julia, if you want to pop up the PowerPoint? And then I'll just mention a couple of things. So we have this, we have a vision of this project that we're going to present tonight. And I do want to just make sure that folks understand where we are as far as the project and the funding. So we have a grant funding source for this project, and we are hoping to utilize that for the construction. However, the funds are not going to be enough to complete the entire corridor segments as we have proposed. So we're going to go through, and this is really the project that we want. This is the project that we'd like to do. And then we're going to have to explore our funding opportunities, whether it's looking at deferred street agreements for properties along the corridor that have frontage improvements that were deferred with prior development, or looking at other local funding sources. We still have to go through that process and understand and define what our project budget is. So although we are looking at this project as a whole, I just wanted to make sure that folks understood that we are still looking at closing the funding gap, and that may have an impact as far as what the final product looks like. But with that, I will turn it over to our design team, and we can take no questions at the end of this.
Thank you, Maz. As Maz mentioned, I'm Julia Harbison. I'm with CSWSD2, and I've got Robert Stevens here from our company. And we've been working on Poplar Street now for a couple of years, really trying to bring this project to fruition. So I appreciate you all taking the time to hear about some of our progress. So we're going to go over a quick project overview, go over some of the outreach and feedback that we've gotten on the project thus far, talk about the proposed project as it is now, and go over our schedule very quickly. So the basis of what brought about this project along Poplar Street was really wanting to calm the traffic, make it safer for all inhabitants, and improve the drainage that's been significantly an issue along Poplar Street. As we were going through and assessing Poplar Street, we really found that characterizing it as one single street didn't quite work. Poplar Street east of Highway 1 has a very different neighborhood feel to Poplar Street west of Highway 1. And so as we were going through our work, our design, and our analysis of the site, we realized we needed to look at them in two different lenses. Here you can see, some of the issues that we have going on Poplar Street. Really bad pavements, bad drainage, a lot of trees, lack of parking, and inconsistent sidewalks. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we really needed to look at Poplar Street in two forms, east and west of Highway 1. West of Highway 1 is more of a coastal residential feel. It's a very, residential community feel, versus east of Highway 1, which actually is a much more downtown commercial type feel to it. Now, numerous public outreach efforts have occurred over the last 3 years, including public workshops, a previous BPAC update, a senior transportation fair, national night out. We also ran an online survey for a month in 2019 and had another public outreach meeting in December of 2019. When we did our online survey, we got over 187 participants from various parts of the city, but Urlita Park was the largest group. And our major takeaways from that survey was that a majority of the users were walkers, and the cypress trees that you can see in the image there are really important to the community. There was a big concern about traffic speeds, and interestingly enough, on-street parking wasn't as big a priority. But the top three suggested items were traffic calming, sidewalks and paths, and street trees and landscaping. From our actual public meeting, the main takeaway that we got was really maintaining the character of the neighborhood, as we mentioned, particularly west of Highway 1, that coastal residential feel. People really wanted and felt strongly about that. Also, really big concerns again about the traffic speeds running along Poplar Street. And then in general, going along with the traffic speeds was promoting pedestrian safety. As I mentioned in the online survey, a majority of the users were walkers. Now, the proposed improvements, to try and meet that feedback that we got on our design, we utilize a few different methods, specifically implementation of sidewalks, but with the appropriate type, whether it be a concrete sidewalk or a decomposed granite path, depending on different locations. And also the utilization of sharrows, meaning it's a shared bike and vehicular zone. So as I mentioned before, we characterized Poplar Street in two halves. What you can see here is our proposed section for east of Highway 1. In the upper left, you can see the existing condition, which is no sidewalks, no street parking, or at least no formal on-street parking. And what we are proposing are two 10.5-foot shared bike vehicular lanes with 4-foot planter strips on either side and sidewalks. For west of Highway 1, just adjacent to the trees, what you'll see here is we are also proposing the two 10.5-foot shared travel lanes, parking on both sides, 4-foot planters, and decomposed granite paths at the actual trees. This is being done to preserve the trees and not undermine them with the very invasive construction of formal concrete sidewalk. However, in areas where there's existing concrete sidewalk, that would remain, and we would simply infill concrete sidewalk between where we needed decomposed granite areas. So schedule-wise, we are on schedule to finalize design by January 2022, go out for public bidding in March of 2022, and then have construction in spring to winter of 2022. And we would love to hear any feedback both the community and the committee have. You can reach out at Poplar Street Project at hmbcity.com for email, and you can also visit the city's website on the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. And I just wanted to add a little bit on that. I just wanted to mention that when we went through this process originally and had our last community meeting in September of or December of 2019, unfortunately, the COVID pandemic started soon afterwards, and this was one of the projects that unfortunately was put on pause, as were a number of others. And so that was that's the reason why we had such a delayed pause between the last meeting and this one. I also wanted to reiterate that we do have the email address that we'd love to hear comments from if folks want to take more time. We're going to have the project plans attached to the website as soon as after this meeting. And please take a look at the plans, see how it interfaces with your project. Reach out to us. We're happy to sit down and meet with folks and discuss the specifics of the project as well. But with that, I'll stop and turn it over to the chair.
Thank you, Maz, and thank you, Julia. Appreciate the presentation and overview. So I think the way we do this is, are there any questions from the BPAC on the presentation? Just to clarify items, and then we would move on to public comment, and then we bring it back for discussion amongst the BPAC. So any initial questions on items that you feel need a little bit more explanation? All right, then, oh, I got a hand. Aaron.
Yeah. Maz, I'm just curious, you mentioned that there's a funding gap. So I was just curious, if there do need to be some modifications to this, have you guys thought about what that would look like? Would you start with one particular side, or would you eliminate some of the elements, or how would you guys approach that?
Great question. That's one of the options that we're looking at. We want to complete a continuous pathway from Main Street to Railroad. So the idea was that we would eliminate and actually phase the project, where it would have one side with the path of travel, and the other side would be a future expansion. That was one option. and also looked at other elements. What we'd like to do is do a nice resurfacing of the street as part of this project, but that's one of the ones that we may defer if we aren't able to attain all the funding that's necessary for that. But we're looking at all the different options, and we're going to talk to the city council as we discuss the other funding opportunities for this one.
One follow-up question, and I guess this is more addressed to the west side of Poplar. I'm assuming that as part of the project, you're going to be taking, just given the dimensions, you're going to have to take some of the right-of-way. I know a lot of the residents that have done some landscaping and things like that. So would they? I was just curious how that works.
That's part of it. I know that there's some properties that have landscaping in the public right of way. There's some of them have asphalt over it. We will work with each of the property owners as we start going into the construction. We'll be reaching out to folks and talking to folks and staking out before we get to that point. And again, once we have the project plans on the website, what we'll do is we'll make sure that we send that communication again to folks to double check and take a look at the plans, because you will be able to find your property and see exactly what we're doing on your frontage. And then we can talk specifically about how that looks and how that impacts each frontage area. Sorry, can you guys hear me okay?
Oz, your mic was a little fuzzy, but I don't know. It was going in and out of clarity.
Sorry about that.
I don't know what's going on.
All right. Any other questions from the committee at this moment? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move over to public comment. And Sherry, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Okay. So on the chat, I have one question from Brian to the hosts and panelists. And he's asking, if we live on Poplar Street, how can we find out about the impact to our particular property?
I'm happy to answer this one. So as soon as after this meeting, we'll upload all these materials. So by tomorrow, all of the materials from the presentation as well as the project plans will be available on our website. Please take a look at those. You should be able to find your property marked out on those plans and reach out to us if you have any concerns or questions, and we're happy to talk and meet with folks. And we really want to hear your concerns and see what we can do to make this project beneficial for everyone.
Okay. Also, I don't have any hands raised. Are any of our attendees interested in saying anything? If so, just go ahead and hit the raise hand icon on the bottom of your screen. Okay, we have Colleen Amore. That's the name that came up, and I'm going to switch her to allow to talk. And you need to unmute yourself. Okay. There you go.
Actually, Scott Amore, 464 Poplar. Maz is talking funding differentials, but specifically, how much money is there available and what is the projected cost? What is the difference at this point? Is there a number, or is it still up in the air due to the design?
We have a good estimate. Looking at the different options and alternatives, we have $1.2 million in grant funding. Our estimates are closer to $2.5 million. There's some funds that we can use for street resurfacing through the gas tax and other public sources. And then the other one would be potentially reaching out. We have about 20 properties that have different street agreements. So we could also reach out to those folks to see if if they would be willing to participate at this point. That's an option as well. But that's something that we haven't formalized quite yet. So we're looking at about $1 million funding gap. Some of that will be able to utilize the gas tax and other proceeds, and some of that would have to be from another source.
Thank you.
So I don't see any other hands raised. Anyone else?
I saw Mr. Hernandez raise earlier. Oh, Amy just raised her hand, and then
Okay.
I saw Mr. Hernandez raise his hand, but I don't see him on the list right now.
Same here. So we'll go to Amy. Okay, Amy, you need to
That better now?
there you go.
Awesome. Sorry. Matt sort of broke up when he was talking about the 4 properties or some number of properties that had something special. I did not hear what you'd said. Can you repeat that portion again?
Absolutely. Sorry about that. Yeah, we have, there are some developments, that there's some properties along Poplar that went through redevelopment, whether it was a major remodel or a new construction. And some of those have what's called a deferred street agreement. Basically, at the time that the construction happened, rather than installing the public improvements and having piecemealed approach, they entered into a deferred street agreement with the city to fund improvements at a future date. Each one of those are specific, and if you have a question about that, whether you're one of the properties or not, we can talk offline. If you reach out to me, I don't want to. We have about 20 properties, and I don't want to list them off, but if you have a question about it, I'm happy to touch base individually and let you know. We will also reach out to those 20 properties that I mentioned specifically. So you should be hearing from us in the next couple of weeks.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you, Maz. That clarified it. It doesn't impact me. I just wasn't sure what you'd said. So will there be some sort of, I know you said you're going to stake the property lines. Many of us, I'm on east side of Poplar. I don't know if that matters at all. But talking to my neighbors, nobody really knows where our property lines are. Like you look at the accessor parcel map, it's not really clear. Center line of street isn't even really referenced. Is there going to be some communication of where our properties end, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my apologies. We're not going to be staking property lines, but we will have some construction staking when we get to that point. However, on our design plans, we have an aerial image that has it overlaid, and it gives you a good sense of where the property line falls. For example, the cypress trees in the middle of the street; those are both wholly within the street right of way. So there are some areas where the landscaping does encroach into it, and those are the areas we would want to work and hear from our neighbors and work with them to address. We have, I think, Julia, if you want to put it back on that cross section, we have a 60-foot right of way from the center of the street, but it's hard to gauge it when you're out there. But yeah, it's a 60-foot street right of way along Poplar, and what you'll see is a lot of there are a good number of landscaped areas that are within the street right of way. So some of those would have to be, we would work with the residents to modify and remove.
Got you. Thank you very much.
Okay. So we have a chat message from Danielle to all hosts and panelists. How will the city address cypress trees whose roots are in the right of way and part of the paved parking area design? Also, how will the design be altered as Poplar approaches the 2 large cypress trees towards the west end of the street? No room for sidewalk or path, and in parentheses.
So we're looking at utilizing the pathway around the trees, and those locations where we have those large mature cypress trees, we likely will not have parking in those locations. So essentially, you would have the tree be in the area where the parking would have been. And so in order to protect that would be an area that we would eliminate. We would not add parking, which currently does not have it.
Okay, so Holly Lynn, you I guess you lowered your hand. There was one other attendee.
She put her question in the chat. So I can read the
great.
next one.
Thank you, Maz.
The drainage was mentioned. How are we addressing the drainage? So we're looking at opportunities to treat drainage through flow through planters and taking some of that into account. So basically allowing it to infiltrate into the ground and reduce the amount of overall stormwater. We're also going to look at improving the existing networks that we have and repairing any damages to some of those infrastructure pieces. And I don't know if Julia or Robert, if you have anything else you wanted to add on that, but it was going to be basically capturing some of the runoff that we have from the street and trying to treat it before it gets to the outfall, the existing outfall.
You have it, Maz.
Okay. So Maz, you want to take the next question? Okay.
So will additional lighting be added? That is currently, unfortunately, that is not part of the current scope. So we are not going to be adding any new lighting as part of this project. And as far as traffic calming measures, there's our speed bumps part of the plan. We are considering speed bumps as well as traffic circles. You'll see traffic circles as part of the plan. We have installed speed humps at the end of the Poplar as it gets to the parking lot. So that's what it would look like if that's something that folks wanted to. If we hear from folks that that's what the preferred method, but I think the last time we met, we mentioned that, and I think folks were talking more about traffic circles and didn't like the idea of having a lot of speed humps. So that was based on the feedback we received earlier in the process.
So they didn't want speed bumps?
Okay, one more, Maz.
Yes, we have, and there's one more clarification. So I'll read it off. When we attended, this is from Colleen, when we attended previous meetings about this project, we made it very clear that maintaining on-street parking is very important to us. We share a driveway with our neighbors and absolutely need on-street parking. I was sorry to see that it was not listed as a priority. I understand where you're coming from, Colleen, and I will say that what we are doing is, although it did not make it as a priority on the list, we are still looking at maintaining on-street parking wherever we have feasible, wherever it is feasible, and wherever it can be constructed. Now, there's some areas where, for example, when we have a conflict with the cypress trees, we would not be removing the trees for parking, for example. So those are there's some trade-offs with that. So it's not that we're not adding on-street parking. We're definitely going to be formalizing the existing parking that's available, but we wouldn't be removing something like the trees for additional parking, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm.
Anybody else?
We have another one from Danielle. What is the city's plan during construction to accommodate temporary parking for Poplar residents that rely on street parking? Also, many residents on Poplar are in favor of speed humps. Traffic calming is a key concern. Definitely hear you on that. So I would like to hear from folks. We can definitely incorporate speed humps into the project design. So we can take that from this meeting. Yeah, we've heard a lot about the speeding as well. So some of the other pieces that we're looking at is incorporating traffic circles at the intersections to break up the blocks and slow folks down as they navigate the intersection. So that's one piece that we're looking at. We can certainly look at the speed humps as well, if that's what the majority of the community would like to see. We do have, going back to the temporary parking, I would say that it would not be, there would be portions of time during construction that parking would not be available on certain sides. We would look to phase it so that we don't eliminate parking on both sides, because that is a really huge impact. And what we would be doing is, in certain times where we have to make, maybe we do have to close a side of the street, what we would look at is likely asking our residents to park on neighboring streets and asking our community, our neighbors, to be supportive during those brief moments where we have to close any parking. But again, those would be shorter duration, and we would not be having long periods of time that the parking would be cautioned off. And then we got another thumbs up for speed humps from Brian.
All right.
We have one more hand raised from Evelyn, who spoke earlier. I'm going to bring her over.
So I noticed on the plans that the trees outside my house, I'm at the corner of Main and Poplar, are going to be replaced by native trees. I don't mind one way or another, but I'm just curious, like, what's the rationale there?
That was based on the location of the trees. It is kind of in a spot where it falls, I believe, on the travel way. So we would actually be, we would have to relocate them. So basically, we would remove those and plant new ones in a location that would be more in line with the rest of the trees on that segment of the street, and it would allow for us to have the appropriate sidewalk and vehicle travel lane width.
Thank you.
Yeah, otherwise, yeah, I wish we could have saved them in its location, but unfortunately we looked at it, the other alternatives, and unfortunately we had no other choice on that particular section.
I understand. Thanks.
Sure.
Anybody else? Okay,
There is one more comment, not on this agenda, but I'll just mention it real quick. So yeah, the project at the Poplar Pathway isn't done yet. We had we were one of the victims of the material supply disruptions, and so we're waiting for the last component, which is the yellow truncated domes. That'll be a concrete. We're replacing that with a concrete ADA access ramp, and we had some bad weather, so we're just waiting for that weather to dry up a little bit, and then we'll finish that piece up. Thank you for your comment, but yeah, that's we'll take a look at it in the meantime too, and see what we can do to address it at least temporarily. Thank you, John.
I have Scott Amore. He's got his hand raised. Okay, and I hope. Hi.
Stop it. All right.
It's okay.
My question is, when the project overview is put on the website, that will include the expansion at the beach parking and the turnaround. Is that correct?
No, so this project will only be it will only be from Main Street to Railroad.
Okay,
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you. That's all I wanted to know.
Sure. So, and just to clarify that the parking lot improvements and some of that stuff that's been discussed in other forums, that's part of the Poplar Gateways project, which is looking at the coastal trail and the beach access, and it's a separate project.
Very good. Thank you much.
Absolutely.
Okay. I don't see any more hands raised and no more comments in the chat.
All right. Thank you, Sherry. So
You're welcome.
final call from anybody in the public that would like to comment on this item. And hearing and seeing none, then we're going to turn it back to the committee for your thoughts and comments. Now you've heard members of the public weigh in. Any additional thoughts that we should share with staff? Eric.
Yeah, we discussed this briefly a few times before, and there's a lot of support for sidewalks on the east side in particular, along Poplar. I also noticed that the intersection of Poplar and 4th is the only stop sign, intersection without a stop sign. Curious if putting a stop sign on 4th would help reduce cars speeding coming off the highway there. I have that for consideration. I also did some research on pedestrian fatalities from the IIHS. And a couple of things were pretty overwhelmingly clear. About 75% of fatalities occurred between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m., essentially at night. So I would strongly encourage streetlights to be included as a much more, to increase safety more than certain other aspects of this. If there's limited resources, I just think streetlights are going to be a higher priority than, I don't know, paved parking spots or something like that. And the other interesting thing about pedestrian fatalities is that something like 80% were at non-intersections. So as people, which reinforces the need for visibility of pedestrians crossing the street. So yeah, I would like to see more streetlights included, as well as with the big trees, people are going to be kind of walking on the street. Like that may be a little counterintuitive, but it increases people's visibility, and it makes you crossing the street not as more visible as opposed to stepping up from behind a car. So there may be aspects of Poplar that are advantageous to safety, and we won't want to get rid of those that are protecting people. Now I understand there's a lot of elderly people or walking with a stroller, and so a sidewalk is also needed. But that's just kind of a thought to put out about how Poplar is currently being used, as opposed to hypothetical change that may not actually benefit to total safety. So I'll leave it at that.
All right, thank you, Eric. Other committee members?
This is Brandon. I'd echo what Eric said. I'm sensitive to the budget constraints that may exist, but I have been riding my bike back that way to my house on purpose lately. And at dusk, you can't see people, much less their dog, on a leash coming down that way. So, like I said, I'm sensitive to budget. I understand all that. I'm also sensitive to the people who live there, who you put a streetlight on, and all of a sudden they have a streetlight outside their house, which they may not like either. But I don't know how the process works. One, to get funding for it, and two is to resolve that issue. But I will say that, I mean, and some of the people that I encounter are older people, and they're not wearing, I mean, I wear a bright green jacket. They're just wearing normal clothes, and they blend into those trees and the ground itself. It's really dark down there. So I would just add that to the conversation. I don't have a resolution or anything, but I do think some form of lighting on that street is going to be vital because of how many people really use it to get down to the beach. Over.
Thank you,
Okay.
Brandon.
So we have Amy, who's got her hand raised, and I'm going to bring her over. You got to unmute.
There,
Okay.
going through the whole exercise. Just speaking to what both of the board members had said, like, I feel like the sidewalk resolves 90% of the safety issues. I understand lighting and slowing down cars are elements to it, but as someone who doesn't want a speed bump in front of her house or a light in front of my house, I do want a sidewalk in front of my house because I bike to work, I walk my dog, I am out on the street for hours every day and don't feel like the speed bump and the light will impact so much as just having a safe place to move my body without feeling like, you know, someone driving their kid to school at top speed is going to kill me.
Okay, so
I'd be interested in hearing more on the speed bumps. You live there. I live on Central, so I don't claim to know, but I do ride my bike down there. And when I come home from riding south, none of those cars, I mean, those cars are absolutely flying down your street and they do not stop at that stop sign. I've almost been hit several times. In fact, they can consider themselves having the right of way, apparently, with a bike with lights. So I'd be interested more to hear your thoughts on no speed bumps down that road. It's almost like a drag strip coming down there. But if you say that that wouldn't have an impact, I'd just like to hear more from you on that. Over.
Is that a question to staff, Brandon?
Oh, I'm sorry. It was a question to the lady who lives there, who was talking about the speed bumps. I mean, people live there; they're going to know more than we know. In general, it's just my experience is that people really speed down that stretch from coming, I guess, off of Highway 1 down to that stop sign, which it must be Railroad. I mean, you know, there's really no way for them to slow them down. I think speed bumps do that, but I could be wrong.
Well, I'm not saying speed bumps won't slow people down. I'm saying if we're talking about a budget deficit, the priority is sidewalks, so pedestrians at least have a safe place to move their bodies. I live on East Side, so while I do go to West Side periodically, East Side is really where I spend most of my time. And in the morning when the Seacrest families are going from Highway 1 to Main Street, they do stop at that stop sign, but they sure don't slow down for me and my dog when they're passing a car going the other direction. So I'm often jumping into bushes and feeling like my life is being taken into my own hands. I didn't intend this to be a conversation about me and my needs, what's going on in the East Side of Poplar, but happy to keep the conversation going about me and my needs if you want.
Well, I don't think it's about your needs. I think it's about people who live there that know more than us who don't. And I value that. I tend to agree on budget. If it was a budget down select that you would put in sidewalks before you would put in a speed bump or a light. I was hoping that we could squeeze in everything, but I tend to agree with you on that. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
We have another hand up. If you want to take another comment.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Maz and Maru if we should wait until after the committee has completed their conversation and then take comments, or do you want me to just fold these people in as you're having your conversation?
Oh, I think we can listen to the comments now.
Okay, so I have Brian. So Brian, you're up.
Yep. Hi, can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, so I live on the west side of Poplar. I can speak to the people speeding here. It's pretty much a nightly occurrence that somebody at some point will go speeding by. I can hear it sometimes within the house here. I've seen people blow through the stop signs, several of them racing up and down the road, probably about 50, 60 miles an hour. That doesn't happen that often, but it does happen. You know, I hope the budget does hold, and I hope you could do all of this. I'm fine with speed humps in front of my house. If there's a light there, for me, that's added security and protection. But that, you know, I'm one person on the street.
I have a couple of comments that may help the conversation. So I'll just mention that the one thing that we're doing is with having formal sidewalks and or pathways and having a parking area defined, we will also have the ability of kind of narrowing the vision of vehicles as they're driving through the corridor. So we will have that kind of road diet feel that will kind of close up the width of the street that does generally tend to have an effect of slowing folks down. So there's that's one part of it. As far as the traffic calming, there are a couple of different methods that we can do that. So we heard a lot was that folks are blowing through the intersections. And so that's one of the reasons why we looked at potentially looking at traffic circles, because that's something we can do in the intersection, the middle of the intersection. We actually can incorporate some nice landscaping into there, and it kind of breaks up that visual, full kind of pavement ahead feel as you're driving through. So that's also an option. And yeah, speed humps can still be on the table as well. We can look at other locations that it makes sense and incorporate those as needed. And we can even add that after the fact, even after the project. That's not hard to install, especially if we are able to resurface the roadway. So there's a couple of ways we can do that. I would also mention that although we don't have a budget to do street lighting, what we could do is incorporate additional street lights on the utility poles that are along Poplar Street. The project budget does not have nearly enough to underground the utilities, so that's something that we haven't been able to, we haven't incorporated to the project at any phase at this stage. So, but we could utilize those and incorporate streetlights on those relatively easily. So we can certainly do that. I think we did receive some feedback from folks that the lights from the residents, that the lights were not, some folks mentioned that they were not as open to that because it does kind of change the character of the street a little bit. So, but we can look at different alternatives in areas. I mean, obviously intersection lighting is very important for safety. So maybe we focus more on the intersections and not so much on the mid segments. So there's definitely things that we can look at as we finalize our design. And one other thing, I just want to just to make sure that I was clear and I didn't, and so folks that understand, we are 100% looking at completing one contiguous section from Main Street to Railroad, just to make sure that there's no confusion on that. We will not, although we may phase it. What we would be looking at doing is phasing either the northern side of the sidewalk and pathway. So we would have one on the southern side of Poplar Street and have a contiguous sidewalk through the intersection of Caltrans over to Main Street and then over to Railroad. And then if the funding is not available, then we can phase that in on the future phase and complete the other half of the street.
Okay, I have no other hands raised.
All right. Thank you, Sherry. Committee members, other thoughts, suggestions? All right then. Well, thank you everyone who participated. Love the interaction. Thank you, Maz, for fielding all the responses. Very useful. And I know this is not the first nor the last time that we're going to take a look at this project. I know there's more work that's going to take place. So more to follow. So with that, we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is the Main Street Safety Project. And this will be a presentation from Maz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm actually delighted to introduce our Assistant Engineer, Jonathan Wu, who has been working on this project for the last few months. And he joined the city back in January of this year. So I think this is the first time he's presenting before this group. So I'd like to introduce Jonathan, and he will be starting up the conversation.
All right. Good evening, everybody. It's very nice to meet you guys. Thank you for the introduction, Maz. Like he said, I'm Jonathan Wu, the Assistant Engineer for the City of Half Moon Bay. Can everyone see the presentation in front of them? Okay.
We can, but you're on the presenter view.
Okay. Let's see here. My apologies, everybody. Let's do. Okay, I don't have much experience in PowerPoint actually. So my apologies, everybody. I guess we'll just go with this. Like Maz says, I am presenting the Main Street Traffic Safety Project that is going to possibly occur within the next year. A little bit of background on it. So we did go through some community outreach in the past, and the community has expressed some desires for bicycle and pedestrian improvements around in the downtown area. And this portion is part of the bicycle pedestrian master plan, which was adopted in September of 2019. We also held our Voice pilot project, which was completed in the summer of 2020. And in August of 2020, staff submitted an application for the Transportation for Clean Air Funds, pretty much to reduce the amount of emissions within the city and within the Bay Area. The project was approved for that funding in October of 2020. So we do have some funds for this project. Regarding the project location, the project limits are within the town center planning area. And with the map in front of you, as you can see, pretty much the project limits are along Correa Street between Main and Johnson Street, and it turns up through Johnston Street to Mill Street, turns left to Main Street, and then heads up north all the way down to Highway 1. So in this presentation, I'm going to split up pretty much the project within two separate segments. We have a southern segment and a northern segment. So the southern segment here, the limitations are from Correa Street to Stone Pine Road. And that portion would consist of Class 3 bike lanes. It would also consist of high visibility crosswalks. It's just upgrading the current crosswalks that we have right now from standard crosswalks to a ladder crosswalk. This portion or this segment also would entail parking directional signs to notify any tourists or others to utilize other parking besides only on Main Street. In addition to that, we would plan to have pavement maintenance and preservation, such as dig outs, crack seal, and slurry seal, and those are just the limitations to what we can do. In addition to that, one downfall, and I'll go a little bit more in depth with this, is the realignment of perpendicular parking to angled parking, which would result a loss in 20 parking spaces. So as I mentioned, the realignment from perpendicular parking to angled parking would be along Correas and Johnson Street. And there will also be two parallel parking stalls, but those two wouldn't be affected as much. And the main reason to why we're proposing this is because of the bike path along this area. If we do have the bike path along this area, changing the angled parking spaces, changing the perpendicular parking spaces to the angled parking spaces will be more beneficial and more safe for bicycle users, just because if currently right now, anybody can pull into a 90-degree spot from both directions. And if we change it to angle, it limits only one direction of transport into that parking spot. Kind of going to the northern segment now, which is from Stone Pine Road all the way to Highway 1. And this consists of Class 2 bike lanes instead of Class 3. This will also maintain or restripe the high visibility crosswalks that currently have after the pavement preservation, like I mentioned prior, on the southern side. So both segments will have pavement maintenance and preservation, and everywhere will be restriped along the project limits. Now, for this northern segment, I'm going to talk a little bit more about Main and Highway 1 and Main and Highway 92, the two intersections along the two highways that we have here in the city of Half Moon Bay. We're going to plan to install green bike lanes along the intersections too. This may be a little bit extra because we would need to go through permitting process through Caltrans, so it might take us a little bit more time. But in all, we believe that this would be a safer route for bicyclists. Now, here are some examples of the improvements that we're planning to provide, such as on the top left, the directional parking signs. We'd utilize the existing infrastructure and poles to implement those parking signs. However, there is one pole that we would need to install, but we could look into that further down the line. On your top right, the high visibility ladder crosswalks. And I think, in my opinion, this is a pretty good picture just because it is at night and the crosswalk is kind of well lit with some lighting around. So we believe that this would be a safer route for pedestrians to cross the street. Bottom left shows the class 2 bike lanes with pretty much a dedicated path for bikes, not shared with vehicles. And a class 3 bike lane is basically using the sharrows, as you can see on the bottom right. The reason why we're not using class 2 bike lanes on the southern segment in the pretty much the downtown area is because of the street widths. It's a lot narrower than Main Street north of Stone Pine Road. Now kind of talking about the completed remaining items and pretty much our tentative schedule down the line. So we currently have the 75% plan specs and estimate. And as Moz mentioned, this is something that we are going to be posting on our city website after the meeting. And the tentative schedule that we do have, we plan to start in the summer of 2022 and possibly end by the fall of 2022. Again, pending all possible outcomes, construction documents, weather and such, and et cetera. The remaining items that we do have, though, is the CDP exemption, the CEQA exemption, and the final bid documents, such as the plan specs and project estimate. So that pretty much concludes my presentation tonight, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that anybody may have.
Great, thank you, Jonathan. We'll open it up to questions from the committee, and I see Carlene.
Yes, I am thrilled to see that we are going to have the class 2 bike lanes from the, basically, I think it was Stone Pine all the way over to Highway 1, which would provide our high school students a safer route to bike to school. I didn't hear you mention delineators. I believe you said it was going to be a green pathway. Is that correct? But are we going to have the delineators separating it out?
That's a great question. So unfortunately, we won't be having the green delineators separating out. That'll turn it into what's called a class 4 bike lane. The reason why we chose to not have a class 4 bike lane, although it might be a little bit safer, would be the usage of how many driveways and road openings there are along this section. There are a lot of driveways along north of Highway 92 to Highway 1. So there would be a lot of cuts between the delineators and the bike path, which would possibly cause a lot of distraction to some drivers too. So that's the reason why we kind of steered towards a class 2. And we believe that this would be more beneficial for not only bicyclists, but also vehicles as well.
just to add on that, we also had, it was just a little bit too narrow to incorporate those, the delineators, unfortunately. Just if we had another foot, I think we probably could have done it another 2 feet, but unfortunately that was one of the other factors that we had to change that approach.
So it will be as you had shown us in the photo, so it will not be green?
It will be, we will have, so what we've been doing is incorporating the bike lane striping through the corridor. When we get to a intersection, especially the major intersections, that's when we incorporate the green striping. So we try to utilize the green striping in the really prominent locations, the high traffic areas.
Okay, can I ask one more question? So at Carias, we have the class 3 for, I guess it's just a block. And so I believe, am I correct that is already a Cheryl? So it's just going to connect up with the Cheryl that already exists on Carias to the library?
That's correct.
Okay.
And on the north end, it would connect to our future class 1 pathway for the Highway 1 North project.
Okay, thank you.
Other clarification questions from the committee before we turn it over to public comment? All right, seeing none, we'll open up for public comment, and I'll turn it over to you, Sherry.
Okay. I don't have any hands raised, but
Paul Gator made a comment in the chat, so I'll read it out. What are the plans for public outreach on this project? So we've done a couple of e-news items on this project specifically, asked for and put information out there. We've noticed this meeting for a number of the residents and businesses that are impacted directly by the project. And we've also continue doing e-news notifications, and we've also shared with the Chamber of Commerce to share with the businesses along Main Street so that they're aware of the improvements coming forward. We'll likely do additional meetings with the businesses at one of the next the Downtown Association meetings, and also we will continue to take meetings and any meeting requests from anybody that's interested to learn more about the project or wants to understand how that might impact their particular property.
And Maz, can I also add, we also sent another mailer out to all the downtown properties back in July, just notifying pretty much the start of this project in a sense. I just want to throw that out there and let you know.
okay. I still have no hands raised on the attendees column.
Thank you, Sherry.
You're welcome.
So I have a question in terms of there was a picture of proposed signage like for parking for bicyclists. Will there be signage indicating to kind of steer around the core Main Street area, commercial area? Yeah, I guess that's the question.
Yes, it doesn't, we haven't shared any, but we will, as well as the pavement markings, we will also have directional signage so that folks understand that the class 3 does go on Mill into Robinson Street. Thank you for that comment.
Okay, thanks, Maz. And then this is just another, because as many of you know, this is my morning walking route from Stone Pine across the bridge and into all parts downtown. So I'm very familiar with all this. But in terms of the bridge, will the Sharrow markings be very clear that the bike should stay on the bridge? Because I, to this day, continue to have, let's say, interactions with bicyclists on the crossing the bridge and walking the dogs and navigating. So anyway, I think you all understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. We're gonna. That's gonna be the continuation of the class 3. We'll go over Main Street Bridge, and the cyclists should not be riding on the sidewalks. That is a ticketable offense in a lot of areas. I believe the vehicle code covers that. So it's unfortunate. I know it's unsafe, especially now. But the hope with the delineation and the signage, we hope to get folks to keep the bikes on the street and share the road rather than going on the sidewalks.
Thanks, Maz. Other comments, questions, concerns from the committee?
Yes. Hi.
Janet,
on the question of the signage and delineation on the bridge, as a bicyclist who comes through there frequently, I make it a habit to ride in the center of the lane, blocking any cars that come up behind me so that they're not tempted to try to pass me. But many of them do anyway. And it's incredibly dangerous. And if there's going to be attention on the fact that it's a ticketable offense to be on the sidewalk as a bicyclist, I think it's also important to be ticketing people who try to pass bicyclists who are trying to use I guess it's called a sharrow in the proper way. So I would just emphasize the need to both educate bicyclists, but also educate motorists so that we are not constantly being forced into parked cars and risking our own lives because people will, open doors in front of us or back up without paying any attention to the fact that we're there. So I usually wear a very neon green yellow helmet and I wear a safety vest and, frankly, I look ridiculous, but at least people can see me. So that's all I'm asking for.
Point taken. We'll definitely communicate that with the sheriff's office as well, especially as we go through the projects. It's unfortunate. I know I've been in the same situation at times when I'm on my bike, and it's a very unnerving feeling, especially along this narrow bridge. We will look at other options as far. We'll also take a look and see if there's any other alternative signage that we can incorporate into that segment at least.
Oh, the other problem that I wanted to mention is that when traffic is stopped trying to get onto Highway 92, it can back up all the way through downtown. And a bicyclist trying to get through there, it can be hell. And the motorists often pull over so far that you simply can't get past them. Again, I think that, tickets or warnings or something from the police department letting them know that, yes, you should not block the intersections, but you also can't block the bicyclists from continuing to use the lane. That's it.
Thank you, Janet. And I see Eric has his hand up.
Hi. I guess first question or comment would be near the Bank of America, there is kind of this, I guess, experimental parking where you back in at a 45-degree angle. With the relationship with cyclists, I would like to see that expanded. I think it was pretty successful. It makes sense. It's a lot more, drivers were able to see a cyclist coming up a lot easier, and would just propose for near the bike lanes or class 2 and 3 for that to be expanded further. Does that make sense? Or everyone knows what I'm talking about? And then if we can go back up to the route, the route of the bike lane going through town. I guess I kind of, I think this is really important because it kind of connects a lot of neighborhoods to middle schools and high schools. So I find this is particularly important. I kind of question whether people are going to go 2 blocks out of their way to use a bike lane for 3 blocks. You're going to middle school, you're going to high school, you're probably running a little late or just barely on time. Are you really going to go out of your way instead of just continuing on Main Street? And so I think it's a behaviorally a little bit more realistic to have the safe bike lanes go through all the way through Main Street. And I understand that Johnson Street is wider, but maybe I think Main Street's just going to be used more, and so it's more important for it to be there. Furthermore, we want to encourage people to come to Main Street. That when you're biking through Half Moon Bay, maybe you're tourists are on going to Venice Beach or Poplar Beach and want to bike into town, we want to funnel people to Main Street, to local shops, and to patronize those businesses. And so increasing pedestrians or cyclists' use of Main Street is important for those two reasons. I'll leave my comment there.
Thank you, Eric. Other comments?
Just wanted to ask a question about Johnston Street. So it's actually only one block off Main. And I love the idea of changing the parking to make it safer for the bicyclists, for sure. But 20 parking spots is quite a bit. Do we anticipate concern, or have we talked to the Johnston Street residents about this?
We have reached out on a couple of occasions, and we've made it very clear in our communications that that's part of the changes that are coming up. We'll continue to communicate this, and we're hoping that after this meeting, folks have either seen it or will hear about it, and will reach out to us and do that. But we will also continue to reach out to the businesses. I think the businesses would be one of the bigger groups that would be impacted by the reduction in parking spaces. I agree, residents as well, but to a little lesser degree. So when we do our next outreach meeting with the Business Association, we'll make that very clear. It is unfortunate part of this. I think that's partially why the perpendicular was originally installed, was because it maximizes the number of spaces that are available. But unfortunately, just with the changes that we're implementing, there is a real safety risk with what that has. And the other option would have been parallel, and obviously that would have reduced the number of parking spaces even more than what we have. Jonathan, so 20 spaces is a lot in that context, but how many spaces over that? How many spaces over that stretch are we talking about? So that's the delta. But what is the original number, and where are we ending up with? That's an important piece there as well.
That's a great question. I have that data point, but I don't remember it off the top of my head. So I will look into that and get back to you on that.
Yeah, I don't want to misstate the number, but it's not I believe it's a 10 to 15% reduction versus it's then something more massive than that. So when we go from perpendicular to angled, each space takes out I would say about a quarter of a space reduction just with the shift in the angle. I will also mention to Eric's comments. Yeah, so that's a great point about Main Street and the character and kind of the folks going through Main Street corridor. Main Street's a lot narrower than Johnson Street, so that was obviously the safety factor was one major component to that. The other one is that because it's narrower, and although we already have angled parking, we've had some issues with vehicle parking and especially trucks kind of sticking out. So we felt that was part of the discussion, I believe, that came into play. And so when the bicycle pedestrian master plan was being developed, that was actually one of the recommendations out of that master plan, was to utilize the side streets of Main Street and actually get the bikes to go around Main Street. So that was one of the recommendations that we're implementing as part of this project.
Moz, coming back to your question about how many spots we have currently versus how many we have proposed. Proposed would be 54 and existing would be 74.
It is a little bit of an impact. So we will, we'll reach out to our folks and see. But we really do feel that from a safety perspective, it would help.
I'd just like to comment on Eric's comments. And I also agree with him that students that are going to school or anybody who's going to work or anywhere, they want the straight path for sure. So I do think maybe, I agree it's safer. I like that, especially for students. But maybe it is about the way in which we communicate. I think sometimes a route is available and they don't know it or we haven't communicated it in the best way. So I think communication is going to be key.
That's a great point. And I think communication with the school district and the schools in the vicinity will be important. So we'll definitely consider that for the next time we reach out to folks. Thank you, Carly.
Other thoughts and comments for staff on this project?
So we'll be uploading the more detailed construction drawings, the 75% to the website. So after tomorrow, it should be available. Please take a look, and if you have any further questions, let us know as we develop the remaining the design. We still have an opportunity to make any tweaks and changes to it. So please take a look and let us know if you have any other comments or questions as well.
Great, thank you, Maz. Thank you, Jonathan. And moving on then to our agenda. So we have staff announcements, but we moved the election of the vice chair to the end. So Maz, do we want to do that before staff announcements, or do staff announcements and then election?
You can go ahead and do the staff announcements. That's fine.
Okay.
Or, I mean, either way, whatever you like.
Okay. Well, let's do staff announcements, and then we'll end the meeting with the election of the vice chair.
Okay. So I don't have a lot of announcements. I will mention the one thing I want to mention is that for Caltrans is doing a large project, and they reached out to a lot of stakeholders and government entities, Mid-Coast Community Council, and some of the other members. They're doing a pretty large project through Half Moon Bay and El Granada. They have a project that's called the Safety Barriers Project, and it goes from Wavecrest Road all the way up through El Granada on Highway 1 all the way to Moss Beach. And what they're looking to implement is pedestrian bicycle safety components along the highway. So this is going to be a great opportunity to really ask Caltrans to take care of some of the really bad problem spots. Poplar intersection, for example, Kelly Avenue. So I'm going to be setting up meetings with their staff at this stage. It's pretty early on in the process. You may have noticed they had Caltrans had some survey folks going through the Highway 1 corridor about a month ago, and they were just doing the topographic survey. But they're going to be looking at doing a relatively big project. So I just want to kind of mention that to you folks so that it's on your radar. I'm going to be meeting with them and having more in-depth conversations about our projects and how we can work together and integrate, to make sure that our designs are integrated well. But I wanted to mention that because there will be an opportunity for public outreach and comments as well. They're going to be going through an environmental review process. And so as this project unfolds, I will continue to update this group, and I'll let you guys know when the document's out for public comment. But I think I'm really excited about it. It's a big project. It's long overdue, very necessary, and we're looking forward to working with Caltrans to make sure that our community gets heard, and we're going to be sharing all of our improvement plans from our bike ped master plan and our CIP. So I just wanted to give that folks an update on that. But again, it's pretty early in the process, and at some point we may even have them come and do a presentation when it's appropriate. As far as timing, we're looking at 2 to 3 years to start construction. So it's going to be a little while, but I just wanted to make sure that I gave you guys a heads up that it is going to be coming down the line. So that was pretty much it as far as my staff announcements.
All right, great. Thank you, Boss. So then the election of the vice chair. So typically the vice chair will run the meeting when the chair is not available. And so that is the core function of the position. So we can open the floor up to nominations, or if somebody's interested in serving in that capacity, feel free to volunteer yourself. So with that, I will turn it over to the committee, whatever you all are thinking about.
No volunteers? Don't be shy.
So I don't plan to miss a lot of meetings, assuming you want to keep me as chair going into next year. So just for, if you're worried about having to run the meeting, I've been pretty good on attendance, if that helps any.
The other option is if folks want to hold off and consider and think about it a little bit more, we could also continue this item for the January meeting. That's just an option.
I'll have a clearer picture on what's happening with me. I have a surgery coming up that might interfere with my ability to, volunteer anytime at all. So yeah, January would be good for me.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if the rest of the committee is okay with continuing the item to our January meeting, we can do so. And then I would encourage you in the meantime to reach out either to Boz, or if you want to reach out to me, I'm happy to talk with you about what it's like to chair the meeting. And so happy to do that and help out. So if everyone's okay, then we'll just postpone this to be continued in January. All right. Great. Well, that takes us through our agenda this evening. Thank you all for your attendance and participation. Thank the members of the public that might still be here with us for participating and giving their input on these two very important projects for the city. We will not be meeting again until January. So as we head into the holiday season, hopefully you're able to enjoy some actual in-person interaction with your family and friends in the next few months, and willing that we're not going to go into a whatever it is, a fourth or fifth surge. So, hoping for the best for everybody. Happy holidays, everyone. I know it's very early to be saying that, but I know I won't be seeing you for a while. And so stay safe, and I may see you downtown Half Moon Bay from time to time. So with that, good evening. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.